I can
No,
tell
I
you.
can't agree with
I
that.
can tell you.
But look
I
what
can-
it was. I mean, it was inhuman housing.
I can tell you about a small project of really low-cost housing down in Georgia, where these houses. $500 one way or another about this. Well, how to get the $500 and then pay $25 a month for the rest for 20 years. Now we have been discussing quite a bit about the subjects of alternative, but we haven't done much about talking about specifically what alternatives do we have in mind, and maybe this is a good point for us to interject into our discussion. Each one of us, or anyone who want to talk, all of us, giving some idea about what alternatives they see and how. For example, each person, if he is on an alternative, how he got turned on to it. And I think this by way of suggesting maybe that other people might see some way of also who haven't gotten into this alternative bag, that how they might get into it.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I came today, was because of the fact that I guess each of us believe that we have, our alternative is the greatest. I don't see our cooperative as being the ultimate answer, as I said before, to all the problems that have beset our community. But I do see it as a beginning. I see it in the light that we in that community, or we in any community, no matter where it's located in the United States, must look toward the people in that community to do something to help themselves and not depend upon these institutions, which we have already stated have just about failed in the job that they set out to do, or matter of fact, never was designed to do. So what we did there was to sit down, view our needs, try to understand what they were, discuss them, went out in the community, talked with people, and started to develop a cooperative. Cooperative, in one step, a store. The second phase, cooperative housing, going into cooperative business ventures of all types. And we didn't limit ourselves to just the health services. Mm-hmm. We hope to expand into getting a number of doctors together in a cooperative health program. This is one of the things that's on the drawing board.
See, I think that what has to be part of that program, and maybe it is, I mean, I really want to ask you if it is, that this kind of taking the initiative and doing the things that need to be done is absolutely crucial, but at the same time it seems to me equally crucial to push on the institutions that the establishment says are going to be able to do the job, and which aren't doing the job, which is how come those needs are still all there. And so it means not just getting your own doctors in and starting your own clinic, but also making all kinds of demands on whatever public health bureaucracy there is to come through with what it's supposed to be coming through with, whether it's vaccinations or in New York City there's a problem of lead poisoning, which must exist in Philadelphia as well. I mean, it exists everywhere in large cities with old housing. And it turns out that the city for years and years and years has known that there was a lead poisoning problem, but has not felt impelled to do anything very much about it. And now it's got a whole big program with lots of noise and lots of tests, and still has nothing that it can do with the housing. In the meantime, one of the reasons it finally got that program is that a number of groups did a combination. The Young Lords, for example, did a combination program of going out and doing their own screening, which began to turn up a lot of cases, and also demanding of the city, by demanding that the city supply the kits for doing the testing, by demanding through sit-ins and through just negotiations with the health bureaucracy, that they begin to fork over some of the resources that they control and that the people need. And it seems to me that it has to be, we mustn't let the government off the hook. It isn't only that we have to do it ourselves.
I agree. You can't let them off the hook as far as that's concerned. It's their prime responsibility. However, I also agree that it is part of my responsibility as a person who's aware of these things in the community to take action.
Oh, sure.
Now, I will also say that the action is not always what the powers to be, the power structure would like it to be,
Yeah, okay.
because we're going to come in direct
Right.
confrontation of the
Right.
things they're not doing, the bureaucracy, the red tape, and everything else. Now, we found this situation where they've gone in and they have torn out whole sections of the community. What reason? You name it, and that's it.
Yeah.
But they can't give us a reason. They have replaced it with nothing. We find ourselves in a community of which is about 280,000 people, and which is, we don't have the facilities, the needs, just to supply the basic human needs. We just don't have them. They're not there anymore.
Yeah.
When the neighborhood changed, we find ourselves no stores, no drug stores, no
Right.
this, no laundries, no nothing.
Somebody asked before why it is that people are beginning to be more militant about making these demands and doing things themselves, and how it is that people who've never had the courage to take a particular kind of step have suddenly discovered, as an awful lot of people have, that they're ready to take steps, that they have to take steps, and they do it. I mean, people do it all the time now. And I think one of the reasons is that kind of thing that you find out when you try to do something for yourself. All of us have found out in trying to do
Right.
something that somebody doesn't like it and comes down on you, and you begin to see what you're doing as more of a struggle than you first thought. I mean, that's really what happened to me when I was in planning school in New Haven, and we tried various kinds of things in a neighborhood a bunch of us lived in to try to get some decent housing, to try to stop an urban renewal project that was going to kick a lot of people out, and to try to
With no
start an
place to
elementary
go.
school, right? Oh, definitely no place to go. New Haven
That's
is where
what
they've
bothers
been moving
you.
people around the city for the last 15 years, putting in highways and putting in parking garages, and they got a highway that doesn't go anywhere. Just goes to the middle of town, went through, it was the first slum clearance project, took out the slum, and stopped. Doesn't go anywhere at all.
Well, that was good enough, wasn't it? That's what the
That's
purpose
what it
was,
was,
to get rid
right,
of the slum.
right.
It did?
Certainly got rid of the
Some
slum.
other places
Right,
is
so
the
then
problem.
people moved to the other couple of ghettos, and now they have roads and other kinds of urban renewal projects in the other ghettos. And people are leaving New Haven.
However, there's one phase, one part that of this whole thing of how one gets started, or well, maybe what I might say it this way. Sometime I feel a bit hopeful when I look around and see quite a few people involved, and particularly when I see younger people involved, when I see people who are traditionally, up till recently, have been in subservient roles, such as the poor and the black, becoming involved. I get a feeling of feeling pretty good about it. I remember when I went down to Montgomery when the bus boycott, and how good I felt to see for the first time in my life at that point where you had just a whole town full of black people really walking with their heads up. Then I slumped back, though, or as I look at this situation, not slump back necessarily, that's a bad term, but I look at the situation, then I find myself not feeling so booed up as I was in the beginning, because what I still see is something that means something to me, is that you have a group of people being led. In all these situations, practically, these people are being led. This certainly was true with the Montgomery situation. This is true, you name any situation, you will find that people are being led by and large. I think that somehow or another we've got to break the this cycle and free the individual to become an individual, become a human being, and to begin to behave. Look at a situation and say, I'll do this because I think it's something that I feel I ought to be doing, or I won't do it, no matter who's doing it. And this, Reggie, is one of the points that disturbed me about one of the points. I mean, there are some points that I like about the Panthers, but it's one of the points that I disturbs me about a group like the Panthers, in a political group, is that it is led. It is a situation that is still running to the regimentation type of thing. Now, I think that I don't care how many good movements come about, until we can get people who are able to behave, no matter where he is, because he has this individual conviction that he should be behaving in a certain manner.
Well,
we're going to be lost.
All right,
this is it. We're not getting.
You know, you
anywhere.
say that people are being led, but let's face things in reality. They're being led, but they're being led for their own benefit right now. It's like we're talking about an educational phase of a revolution. We're talking about ultimately a complete change in government. We're talking about a transition from capitalism to socialism. You see, and the masses of people just don't have that political perspective or that political outlook that will enable them to see that the free breakfast program is a socialist program, that a free medical clinic is a socialistic program. So what we're leading them with is programs. We set up a breakfast program in the community. We show people how they can go about sustaining and continuing the program, and then we let the people take it over. So we're not leading them in the terms of leading the black people, because we got the program from them. You see, they told us that their children were hungry, and we just developed something that would feed them. They tell us that they lack medical attention.
I don't think you're talking quite to my point. In the first place, I don't accept that there's any group yet in the black community leading, quote, the black people. They're leading certain groups of people in the black community, as in every community, but there's no one group. I think the group that perhaps has the largest following, or did up until recently, was SCLC, Slick. But they did not have all the people. So I'm not talking about, and as a matter of fact, my own terminology does not include a statement which says, when I'm talking about a certain group, that it includes everybody that you would call
wait
black,
a minute.
everybody that you would call
Since
white.
the question is directed, when we talk about leading, we're not talking about who can get out 250,000 people. We're talking about an organization that's leading people somewhere. Anybody, if they get the proper grants, what you just talked about, can get out 250,000. They can get out 500,000 and lead the people absolutely
Yeah, well,
nowhere.
I'm not-
So
I'm not
in a sense,
speaking-
they're not a leading.
I'm not speaking in favor or of Slick necessarily. This was
I understand
just
what
an
you're saying.
example.
So
I understand the reference which I
Right,
use Slick,
right.
not
Okay,
as
well,
something better than
What
Panther
we're saying,
or worse at the moment.
What we're saying is that the Black Panther Party, since its beginning in October 1966, has felt the wrath of the hardest and the most vicious repression that we've known, and quite a few black people have, older black people have come and told us that no organization has suffered as much as the party. Now, I think that this is an indication that the strength or the support that's manifested in the party, because if the people didn't support the party would have broke. The pigs would have broke the parties back a long time ago, because they've been constantly after the leadership. First it was Huey, then it was Eldridge, now it's Bobby, and they're constantly going after him. But the party is continually springing up everywhere in the South.
I think that's
so-
what Wally's question is, that you sort of get the deification of Huey Newton or Martin Luther King, and these are the leaders, and people follow these people. And what Wally is saying is that that's great when you get people out there shouting hurrah for Huey or hurrah for Dr. King, but what he wants to see, and I'm not sure why,
Well,
what the
what-
specifics
yeah.
are, but that people should be able to somehow get out and
See, I don't think
Well-
it's great that people just follow leaders. It seems to me that in fact, one of the real problems that we have, and one of the things we have to break through, is the notion that there has to be a leader in order for anything to happen.
Huey and Bobby
It's
are
not
not
leading
leaders.
leaders, right.
Well, first you have to understand what we're talking about. The party was not just something. The 10-point platform didn't fall out of the sky. Black people gave this to them, and they put it in action. It's a guide to action. And when we talk about leadership, we're not talking about people going out and praising Huey as some type of Jesus, or
But
praising
they
the
do.
Black Panther Party.
They do. Every leader, the people who consider him as a leader, Martin Luther King, Hugh Newton, or Malcolm X.
Well, see,
all these people.
Jesus Christ.
First,
you can go
And
first.
I'm gonna
Jesus
have to
Christ.
disagree with you
Jesus
because
Christ and Jesus
it's been a
Christ.
statement. It's been a statement made about the party.
And even in smaller connection, you know, you just take a very small group that you don't know anything about.
If
You
you-
go in that situation,
I can tell you
and he
this.
becomes the lead. Take a little church.
Yeah, but
I
are
can
you
tell
saying
you
there
this.
shouldn't be any
Let me say
leaders?
this.
Yeah,
Let me say
my
this.
point is, I think that you said, and perhaps you didn't mean what I thought you meant. I agreed when you said we question the reason for leaders. I think now that what we got to develop is that the people won't need a Martin Luther King. It won't need a Malcolm. It doesn't mean that these people won't exist. They won't have great ability. But this great ability would be exercised not as someone's following the great leader,
Yeah.
but he's down working, and that I may have
See, I
some
don't think
ability.
that's the
Each
leader's
one
And
of us.
job.
Bobby
though.
Seale founded the party.
Beg pardon?
Yeah.
Huey Newton and Bobby Seale, they built up the Black Panther Party. They started it because of the people's needs. The people are the motive force. When we say right on to Huey because he's in prison now, it's because he sacrificed a lot.
I'm not discussing. I mean, I'm not. I mean,
I
agree with
understand
you
that. What I'm
that
saying- what I'm
Newton should
saying
not
is
be
that,
in prison.
Huey's
that,
not
We're not
praised.
arguing that point.
Huey
Okay.
is not praised, and
No, I'm
we
not
don't
arguing
try
that
to
point.
project Huey as the leader of the revolution. We get people to understand that, or try to understand why Huey was in prison. Huey is an education to the people, just as Bobby was. You see, we don't want people going around praising Huey for no reason other than being Huey P. Newton. It's been a statement made in the party that nobody in the Black Panther Party is beyond, I guess, punishment if they go wrong. If Huey becomes counter-revolutionary, then he'll be dealt with on the same basis of anybody. So in a sense, we're not trying to put Huey up on a pedestal and then start hiding little dark secrets of Huey, like so many organizations have been known to do.
Yeah, but my point is being missed. I mean, I could say
Yeah,
I
it
don't want to
probably
be
is.
talking in reference to this. I mean, I'm against the. I could argue against several points you made, but I'm not interested in that point. I'm trying to make a certain point. So let me see if I can state it differently, because we're getting off the point for what I want.
Right.
I'm concerned about each of us as an individual and everybody else as individuals, which we tend all over the world, particularly in this country where I've lived all my life, tend to not to exalt this particular, what I think, a very unique thing. That you see that each person thinks himself so small. He thinks that he has no power. And one of the things that I think I learned in 33 months in prison on my first bit was that the individual was pretty terrific. I came out of prison thinking myself being pretty terrific. And if you want to know what I think about myself, I think that sometimes I'm pretty beautiful, because at those times I live halfway what I talk about. Other time I'm just like, I'm pretty ugly on the basis that I fail. But all in all, I think of myself as being pretty wonderful, that I have within my own abilities to carry out certain things as Wally Nelson sees them, not as you or anyone else.
Well, this is
And
what we're talking
this-
about.
this is what
exactly
I'm
what we're talking about.
In other words, what you're
Huey
saying-
has laid down. Well, excuse me. Huey has laid down a program where people can just what a breakfast program. That's not a Black Panther Party breakfast. Nothing that we do is Black Panther Party. It all comes from the people. It stems from the people. And when we say power to the people, that's not a hollow expression. That's not some hollow rhetoric that we just shout to try to draw people to the party. If the people from the community of North-Philly, or if the people from Columbia Avenue was to come into our office and demand that we do something, then we are servants of the people. This is what Huey is. Nothing more
Of the
than
people
a
or
servant
black people.
of the people, of black people in particular, because we're the most oppressed. And Huey is a black man, but Huey is well, let me just say this. The Black Panther Party has been a proponent of class struggle in this country. This was one of the first black organizations that came up and started blowing about class struggle. And because of this, we've been feeling the repression of the pigs with power structure. Now, Huey's a black man, and the thing that motivated Huey to action was the repression and the suppression of black people. And this is the same thing that motivates all Panthers to action. You can ride around Philadelphia, and I could see some of the misery, some of the brutality and murder being inflicted upon my people, and this is the only thing that motivates me and drives me to the party. So,
you see, we have no argument about the oppression. This is not my,
Right.
See, I would agree, and the thing that has motivated me to move is not only that, but is that, but also the matter of where I think I move more profoundly is on the matter of considering myself as a human being and exercising this. This is why I refuse to pay taxes and other things that I do. Not only do I work in the area of oppression against people because of color and this type of thing, but the matter of sending people to, for people going into the army and this type of thing, which I'm just as strongly opposed and have been put in jail several times for that as well as for the other. And perhaps we continue to be put in jail, but this, I do it simply as an individual, as a human being. I'm a human being, I'm connected with every other human being, and I must do something to justify my humanity for myself.
How do you get things organized?
Right.
I mean,
The mere fact that you acted as an individual and your philosophy is basically the same as what we advocate, but you acted as an individual, and nobody know that you spent 33 months in prison for opposing the system. So when we talk about in terms of acting as an individualist, this is not going to bring about the freedom or the liberation of black people or any people in this world. It's going to have to be.
It would if everybody did it all at once.
Well, yeah,
but it have to be
then you gotta
organized.
No, but
Then
see,
you
I'm
gotta
not sure,
organize.
because
Everybody
it
can't
has to
just
be
run
people
out there
doing
and
some
be
of the same
individual.
things all
Sure,
at once. I mean,
right,
the
yeah.
dilemma that the two of you are posing really the poles of is that the balance between everybody having the confidence to move, to do things, which is a really hard kind of confidence to get, you know, and all of us have to
And
kind of re-get it every day.
basically that's
But-
what the movement is
You
about.
can't
Well,
break
yeah,
the
but-
machine
but-
as well put together as this in this
By
country
itself, right.
by individuals acting as individuals because individuals think that this is the thing that must be done.
Yeah, but
No,
look,
but it
it's, I
takes
mean,
an individual
one of the things,
conviction, the dedication to want to.
it's individuals
In the
acting
first
together,
place.
but it's also, I mean, it's got to be people really in it out of some kind of individual conviction and not doing it just because somebody else said it's a good idea. But that doesn't mean that you don't still need people who can articulate the ideas and who can get them across to other people.
who serve as symbols.
Right? Well, they're not only symbols, but yeah, I mean, who can be symbols as well as other things.
Sure.
And I think maybe I am disagreeing with you. I didn't mean
Yeah.
to say I thought there should not be any leaders. I think that there's a real problem with the rest of us tending to rely too heavily on leaders instead of using our own heads and our own beings and our own actions.
Because when you advocate leaders, when you do this, it means in effect that most people are going to rely on them. This is
I don't think that's
people. I mean, you got people. This country is full of people with very good intelligence,
Right.
and they sit down talking about right Nixon, beg Nixon to stop the Vietnam War.
Well, that's because they don't have the confidence that they can do anything about it.
Because they're leadership minded. They don't even have the idea that I can do some things myself. The hardest thing to get across to people is that they don't have to do everything. They don't have to do certain things if they don't want to do it. That there's a law which says you do one thing. Everybody practically thinks you have to do it.
Yeah, but look, if you're going to resist going into the Army, for example, it really helps to know, I mean, not having been faced with that, I don't know, but as a guess, it must really help to know that there are other people also resisting it. To know if you wind up in prison, that you're going to find other political prisoners in prison, and that you're going to have, there are things to be worked on together.
Reggie's talking about revolution.
Right. This is what the alternative is. It can't be reform. It can't be revision. That's not an alternative.
I'm not
It's-
talking about
all right,
reform.
all right,
I'm not
well-
talking about revision either.
All right, well, we talking about revolution then.
Right.
All right. And in trying to bring about revolution, people, thousands and millions of people just don't rise up. You see, there's an individual, there's a party, and that these people go to those people and listen to what the people have to say, and they formulate a program. They formulate some kind of action that can guide those million of individuals who have the same problem and who want to move in the same manner. And they bring this to a force. And this is the same thing that the party is talking about. They're not talking about people just blindly following anybody. We're talking about stimulating revolution, and in order to do that, you have to have a revolutionary party. There's no other way a revolution can be brought about. Not millions of people just jumping up, throwing stones at something that they don't, because before it's all over, they'll be throwing stones at each other.
But you're perhaps going to wind up doing it
individual
anyway.
tendencies.
You're
But
perhaps
that's
going to wind up
individual-
doing that anyway. My own thesis is that the method of revolution are two ways. One is throwing stones and with guns. One is that you get a group of individuals educated to the point that the power structure cannot handle them. In other words, what I say is, and when I find out that I have the most strength, is when they get me into the worst controlled situation in the world, like a prison, and I say to them, well, you can't make me do anything. You can't make me work. You can't make me do one thing. You can't even make me walk. Now, this, to me, demonstrates real personal power. And now, this is just small. Then I come out with a group of people and say, now, I want to work with you. Let's work together. Do you agree with me that we should do certain things? Well, they say, no. Okay, well, we don't have a program. But if, as in the case with a group I call Peacemakers, or in the case with the Operation Freedom group that I work with, board, if we can agree on certain principles that we can work on. I work with groups too. But the most important thing about my work, about anybody's working in those groups, if we're going to get a real revolution, is that each one is there because you have the individual conviction, and that if every one of us walked away, that individual will stand there and say, I will do this.
All right. Well, you have to have a profound love for the people to even deal in and talk in this revolutionary situation. Okay, that's something that we all more or less agree with. The reason why the war hasn't stopped in Vietnam is because those people haven't offered an alternative. It's because those 500,000 people that were in Washington all had individual thoughts. They all had individual minds, and they represent no force other than being able to gather 500,000 people at one given spot.
Yeah, well, part of
with
the
no
problem is
action.
the only thing they really agree on, or one of only a few things they really agree on, is that the war should end. I mean, the thing about a 10-point program or a
program
broader
to stop
program
it.
is that people agree on more
alternative.
things than just particular.
That's
But that
what
doesn't.
a 10-point program is. It's,
Yeah, okay.
it's an alternative to establish order. If they had formulated some kind of program, some kind of demands that they could present, other than saying, "Well, stop the war, bring GIs home," that represents absolutely nothing. That man sat down there and watched 500,000 people in Washington D.C. and came out the next day and said he wasn't paying.
I suspect it bugs him considerably.
Well,
but,
right, but the fact he
but
said
you're correct.
No,
that
but look,
they don't represent the American people. Because there wasn't anything there,
Yeah.
and this is the whole thing about this revolutionary situation. The people in this country are really failing to accept the fact that there must be a revolutionary party, and that all people, regardless of their own individual tendencies, must understand that. If they understand that we have to change, that we have to, people having more personal freedom, then they can see that we're not shutting off their minds or their thoughts or their voice, but we're just saying, well, come on in and let's bring it all together, you see, and let's work on that basis. I think
No, you see I think that's where I begin to part company, which is okay. I'm perfectly prepared to go along with, for political purposes, to go along with the idea that the Black Panther Party is the vanguard party at the moment, and that it has that it has a front rank.
Well,
know,
all right, you made.
But once you
you
say
made a statement that you know you said at the moment. You're saying that you don't believe that the Black Panther Party is a vanguard party, and in essence, that's saying that you don't believe black people are the revolutionary vanguard of American Revolution number two.
That's not what I'm saying.
Yes, it is. That's in essence. This is what you're saying, and this is what so many white people say. Because they can't accept some of the rhetoric of the party, they say that it's just a momentary revolutionary vanguard, and because they're saying that they can't accept with so much rhetoric from black people before they can understand that black people are the revolutionary vanguard for American Revolution number two. So you know, when people take that attitude towards the party, they're taking that attitude towards black people who are talking about the use of force to put down force. The use of guns to take away guns.
I don't have any problems
It doesn't
with
have
that.
to be a Panther. It doesn't have to be the Black Panther.
I don't have any problems with
you're
that.
Talking about. You're talking about black people who advocate armed conflict, not advocate, but who don't run from the realities of armed confrontation.
I've got no problem with that. What I have a problem with is the notion that there has to be a revolutionary vanguard party for revolution to take place. And once somebody starts telling me that unless I fall into line, behind, the given party, that then I've become a counter-revolutionary and the whole business. You see, that's where Wally's mindset begins to operate here.
You don't have to fall
see.
in line behind what the party lays down. Only thing we're saying is, if you believe that revolution is a necessity in America, in other words, if you think that American people don't have any rights, and if you think that the only way that they have any is to overthrow this government and build one that works for the people, then what you have to do is go out there. You have to stimulate revolution in the mother country. Understand? You have to start to make them work. And we're not saying you have to do everything that we do, but we're saying do it because you really know that these things are important. You got to pick up a gun. A scalpel will do it. And if you don't want to do that, then you are counter-revolutionary.
You see, because we're taking all our experiences from right from our community.
Sure.
It's like I said, why white people can't relate to the word fascism is because they don't have big racist pigs riding around killing them at night. You see, or taking them in a cell and hanging them or breaking their neck and come out with a weird statement that the man hung himself.
Yeah.
You don't suffer from that. And so therefore, it's hard for white people because of this ingrained racism that's instilled in them.
You see,
that they fail to realize. They think that when black people start talking at such a pitch, or they limit themselves and say, well, this is as far as we're going with them. Because when they start talking like this, I can't go along with it. And because we have to reflect back to what we said. Either you're part of the problem or you're part of the solution. Either you're revolutionary or you're counter-revolutionary, and not my words. Me sitting out saying that you're counter-revolutionary can't turn the people from you, because if you're serving the people and you're working in the interest of the people, then this is what determines a person's direction. If you're counter-revolutionary, the people will see it. And when I say, well, he's counter-revolutionary for such and such a thing, then the people see that you have done it, and they see it's not in their interest. Then, as far as the people are concerned, you're counter-revolutionary. So I think that it's because of ingrained racism that's in I find in 99% of white people. I don't care if they call themselves revolutionists or not. That it's hard for them to accept the mere fact that SDS was formed. You know why? Because they were talking about the white revolutionary vanguard party, and it's only in one revolution. There's only one vanguard party. It can't be two. It's just impossible.
Well, that's a lot of dialectical stuff that I
Black people are the reason the
that you can-
revolution. If you check it out now 6 million Jews was knocked out or wiped out. But check it out, in America, the reason the Black Panther Party's vanguard revolutionary party in America is because of the fact that 50 million black people have been genocides been committed against us. You understand? We're still being victimized and brutalized, and you can sit back and go home and it doesn't happen to you. But you understand? We live with it every day. That's why I'm not a pan for 12 hours a day. Every day of my life, because man, fascism exists in my community. It's next door to me. And that's why we're leading the people on. We're letting black people know that they're doing it to us now because we're right here. Well, you're still black, and we are too. We're not alienating ourselves from the people.
People can
They-
understand.
Margaret and Reggie both, your rhetoric leave out one concept which I hold is, and you perhaps you may not agree with the concept, and that concept is that when you talk about fascism or all these things that we're talking about, we're really not talking about black and white here. What you were talking about is what you would say in another word, class struggle. That's one way of saying it. But and that's perhaps a good way of saying it.
Look.
Because what is at play is that in a situation of this type, of any type, where you are going to carry out a type of subversion and type of activity that you have in this country, where certain people are picked out to mistreat. The people who are being mistreated, the reason for doing it is not basically that they are black, but basically because of their situation, which in this case, because of the slavery condition that the blacks were in, this type of thing. And if it weren't the blacks, it'd be someone else.
When there are no more black people left, it will be somebody else. When they white,
what I'm
okay?
trying to get you to see is that if we're going to see the problem in its true perspective, then we've got to stop looking at black and white. We got to look at
It was a black
How
and
can
white.
you? How can
I don't think you can stop looking at
how
black
can
and
you?
white.
I mean, the base.
It was a black and white issue when
the-
Bobby Seale was
the-
gagged and bound. Nobody did anything. When the seven
People-
got sentenced,
people
everybody
were
bombed
concerned.
United States of America. That's black and white.
No, what I'm talking about, sure, it is expressed in black and white in order to what I think to confuse such people as yourself, because you're going around talking about you white people. The case is that you have your power structure, most of whom are white. But they don't even behave that way because they're white. They behave
All the power
because of
structure
certain.
is white. It ain't no black
certain.
people in the
Right on.
power structure.
Oh, well,
Let's
we
clear that.
need not argue that point. But in any case, what I'm trying to get you to see, my dear friends, is that if we're going to get to the problem, if you're going to do something about the problem, you're not going to do it on the basis of color, because you're going to miss the whole point.
We have to organize in the black community, and
Well,
white
I'm
people
not.
have to organize in the white
matter
community.
if you organize in the community you live in, I subscribe to it. But then to organize in it because, quote, we are black against the white.
We-
I
We're not
disagree
saying
with
against
that.
we're against
I-
whites.
I-
What
I
we're saying
agree
is
with
we're
that.
not
I
gonna
have to
see
agree
we're
with
not
that.
gonna have any more
I
Bobby
can't
Seale
agree with
bound
that.
in
But
No.
the Black Panther Party has never done that, as far as I know. And the
Well, I'm not- I'm- my-
maybe we can get this back on the track. I think if I couch what I said in different language, which is, what I want is a society where everybody has his choice of what he's about, how he's going to live, what he's going to do with himself, what he does with his friends and family. And that means that I want to live that way now. Yeah, and I'm prepared. I'm prepared to work in groups of whatever size, in masses, in parties, whatever happens to be most efficacious at any given time. All I'm saying is that because that's the kind of society that I want, I don't think you can get there by keeping yourself subservient to a line or to a group or anything. You've always got to reserve for yourself the option to do what you personally
Do your
think
thing.
Right.
think is right. Yeah. Okay.
We're not talking about a group now. We're talking about an idea. We're talking about a reality. This is what the party is all about. This is what we're about. We want the same thing for you that we want for ourselves. We want to be able to live a decent life, and we want to be able to get a job and do our work and according to our ability or according to our own talents, be able to forge ahead and not be restricted because there's a quota, you see, that's laid down by the capitalistic type system. So you're advocating in reality a socialistic type system, and so are we.
Yeah.
You see?
One of the really important things that we sort of got into and drifted away from is what I think you were mostly saying, that one of the tricks of the power structure is to get us fighting each other, so that we wind up screaming at each other about who really is the vanguard party, when you're right, we do very largely share a vision of what we want. And I just want to tell a story that's an interesting example of where they pulled that off once. And the women and the black people in question learned a lesson from it. Medical school, I think it was Harvard Medical School, came under some pressure from women in the medical school and women in the community to admit more women, because there are very few women admitted to medical school, because the line is that they will drop out and get married and go away, and you can't have women doctors and so on. And so there was a lot of pressure, and so finally the school agreed to admit some more women. And as a result of that, where the previous year they had admitted 30 black students to the school in a quota, the next year they admitted 15 blacks and 15 women. So it wound up with both the blacks and the women getting screwed. And the lesson from all of that was that the two different groups that were pushing on that medical school had to find a way to push together so that they didn't wind up being used against each other when they really had a shared
I see what
sense
you're
of what
saying,
they
but
were doing.
I heard what you said about the system uses racism to separate people. I'm not saying separate black from white. If people decide that they want to live together in society, I say right on. If they decide they don't, I say right on. That's the people's decision.
Right.
But what I'm saying is, white people can no longer come into the black community and talk about organizing, because black people heard enough of that. What I'm saying now is that if everybody's got the idea that revolution is a necessity, then you go in your I don't mean community like the 3 area blocks that you live. When I say community, go where white people are and you work with them. You tell them why and you show them how come. And you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna stay in the black community. That's everywhere the black community is, and we're gonna tell them why and how to do it. We're not saying how because we know better than the people. We're saying why because the people have shown us. We're people too, man.
You see, that's
what I'm saying.
Right. Well, I agree with you. But what happens is, what's gotten a lot of white people in trouble then is a feeling that because a lot of white people have felt that the place where revolution was going to happen, if it was going to happen, was going to be the black community, and they wanted to be part of making that revolution, that they had to go in the black community. Now they've learned that's not where they go. Right. But you see, that's why people have to understand their own ability to do things where they are, and the need to do things where they are.
I think we can clear most of this talk of racism up. Now, we understand one thing, and it's clear to us that Bobby was bound and gagged and he was separated in that trial because he was black. We don't pick any bones about that because it should have been somebody else. Okay, we're saying that we will still advocate class struggle, but we will not advocate class struggle at the risk of racial suicide. You see, while we're laying in the cut, keep advocating racial suicide, the pig is escalating his war against black people. He's escalated his extermination by, just recently, in the city. At least 5 black people have been shot and murdered by some racist pigs. And yet, all these people who talk about solidarity, racial solidarity and racial accord are laying back and they're not opening up their mouth. And what we're saying, we're going to advocate class struggle because we feel that the masses of people make revolution. The masses of people have to sustain a revolution, but we are not going to have a revolution in this country at the risk of all our people being exterminated or racial suicide. We're saying that white people have been lagging, and they themselves have allowed racism to come into play because that case in Chicago, and I'm sure that if you sit down and you talk to some of those people from the Conspiracy 7, they'll tell you themselves that it was racism that allowed them to sit there and watch our
this matter of the point that you beating over, bringing out so many times the same thing, we're not arguing that, Reggie. What my point is trying to get us to see really what the problem is so that we can do something about it. And I made the statement earlier, and maybe a blatant way, that the problem was not black against white. And I noticed you looked at me real funny and you were shaking your head. No, simply because that in the expression of the problem here, it had come out that way. It had come out that much pressure, much treatment, the most brutal treatment is against the black. Now, when you to get my point a little clearer, I like to cite two or three things. When you speak of the police, whom you call pigs, you also got to mean a bunch of black pigs.
And we don't make any distinction on color either.
One of my vivid memories in Chicago when I first moved there many years ago, I stayed there several years, was the guys talking about one cop who was the roughest, the toughest, the meanest. And he was a guy that was blacker than any of us sitting here. And he was feared by everybody on the South Side. So therefore, you see, I cannot talk about black and white in this case. And then the other thing that I want to cite, early in my life, I think I got a lesson in economics. I got a lesson in what the power structure was about without even knowing it until later that I began to realize what lesson I gotten. For 3 years of my life as a child, my family lived on a plantation. The first year, and I'm talking about a slave plantation, I'm talking about where you're a slave, where the mules had better quarters than the slaves did. On this plantation, however, there were white. As the man who ran the farm called them poor white trash. And what he did was, he would come to the blacks and would try to screw them over, try to give them the more oppressive. And they would say, "No, Mr. Jim, that isn't fair. No, we don't think we." Okay, I'll go over and get the poor white trash to do it. So he goes over to the so-called poor white trash, and so these people, these poor black slaves, we're talking about those damn black slaves, poor white trash. He used the same tactics when he went to the whites. "I'll go and talk to the niggers," he said. And so they were damning the niggers. So these slaves, black and white, and this man, the most important part about this isn't so much this as you look back over, this man was sitting on top of all of our backs, and he didn't care any more for those whites than he did for the blacks. All he wanted was slaves. And this to me is a profound lesson in what we're talking about.
Right.
Also, another year we moved to a black plantation. His excuse for treating the blacks on his plantation the same way the white did, if I don't do the same thing, they'll run me out of the country. Well, my goodness, I think he should be run out of the country. Don't make me a slave because he doesn't want to be run out of the country, you know. Well, there you
agree
are.
With that. And it's the same thing, both of them, in both cases, you were dealing with pigs. Now,
no, you see, what I'm trying to get you to see, it isn't a matter of skin color. You see, this is what I'm dealing with, skin color bit.
This is what I'm talking about.
You got to look for
you keep saying,
for the enemy.
You keep saying that.
No, but I'm trying to keep you, Reggie, from going around looking at white skin for the trouble.
You've been sitting there for almost an hour.
Friend, because the black will do it to you with screw you.
You have been sitting in that chair for an hour advocating, saying that we talk about race. We oppose capitalism. That's what we oppose.
Well, capitalism doesn't know black or white.
Right.
That's what I'm saying.
But it uses it.
I'm saying,
both will use it.
I'm saying,
both will use it.
What I'm saying, you talk about pig, like we just use that exclusively for white pigs. We use it for pigs. We use it for pig actions. Any man who doesn't respect or have any regard for persons' lives or persons' rights is a pig, and we don't care if he's black or he's white. Anytime you can get a black man that sits up and talk about he endorses capitalism and he'll fight and die for it, is because he'll step on black people, he'll step on white people, he'll step, and so we're not talking about race. We're talking about. I said we've been proponents. I think I said at least 3 times of class struggle, but I said that we're not going to have class struggle at the risk of having our people committing suicide. Why a lot of these organizations are running around, not white organizations, and a lot of black are running around not being able to pull their heads in and see what's going on in this country. It's about 76 people who rule the economy. They rule the politics. They rule everything. They rule everything in this country, and we understand that. We understand that clearly.
Right. I agree with you. See, you and I really have great agreement. Our disagreement isn't the matter of perhaps our analysis would be a little bit different, but our greatest disagreement come at the point of one, how you get revolution.
Well, you know, I
You
think
see,
that
that's perhaps the greatest
that
one.
you and me just eliminated the rest of the people are in here. We're supposed to be talking about alternatives. I think that, you know, we can discuss how we can go about getting revolution. And I think that we can bring this this racial discussion to a head and to a close after this, because we both say the same thing. We don't endorse racism, and we don't support it.
You know, one of the, you know, the central fact of American corporate capitalism is race, and you know, and we talk about racism, and racism is a fact of life because it's ingrained in all of us. You know, it works through the system, and it works in people's heads. But where we come out of it, and how you get out of it, is I think, you know, what each of us is about, in part, because you know, I know that's how I started. You know, that's how I got socially concerned, was, you know, when I was a little kid, was by thinking about black people and white people, because it was thrust upon me. And so, and almost all of, well, certainly the, you know, the groups that are represented by the black people here are mostly concerned about black people and black communities. Health PAC deals with health needs of the poor. The poor in New York, at any rate, are mostly black and Puerto Rican.
Well, what you're really describing, though, is people, all of us, being concerned about exploitation of one kind
Yeah,
or another. I mean, it
right.
happens to be one of the reasons we're interested in the health system, besides that it's a terrible health system and very exploitative, is that, in fact, it's one of the places where it's becoming clearer and clearer that more and more people are the poor, more and more people are the exploited.
Mm-hmm.
And it isn't just black and brown people in New York anymore. It's the people who have to buy Blue Cross, right? Blue Cross, because it's the only way they can ever pay for anything. And Blue Cross raises its rates because it's run by all the same people who run the hospitals. I mean, there's a whole series of things like that. And I think I agree with you that race is a central fact of American life today, and that you know, we have to find different ways to deal with that till somebody comes up with an effective one. But I think that the central fact of all the things you're describing, and the central fact of what we're all fighting, is the exploitation of some people by other people.
Right. Okay.
Right.
Okay.
You know, this is basically what we've been trying to project all morning. You know, about exploitation, about oppression, and not about race. We just, you know, you just can't talk about capitalism in this country and not talk about racism. You can't effectively talk about wiping it out unless you can effectively talk about beginning to educate white people that they're being exploited, and educate black people that you know, it'd be almost impossible to bring about all black revolution here in this country on an international basis. You know, that's something else. But I'm talking about here in this country, it would be almost virtually impossible for us to sustain a successful revolution here because of the conditions and because of the programming of the people here. You see, so you know, we've been talking about exploitation, but we've been just jumping into racism, and we just let racism really just turn us from what we should be really talking about, and that's in terms of the system, the courts, the police who try and convict and execute people on the spot, the merchants who exploit the people, the slumlords who have people living in filth that's not even fit enough for a dog. And I think that this is what we should be talking about, and talking about setting up some alternatives, letting the people know that they
maybe
do
that's
have
maybe
alternatives.
that's what the folks on the tube want to know about.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
you mentioned this thing about the alternatives. What do you see as some of these alternatives short of the revolution?
Well, in the long run, I think revolution is inevitable. But I believe that if people could form more co-ops like you've done as far as food, and people mobilize to form co-ops to take these houses that the city have stripped and just let them sit and rot, and people in the community go ahead and fix those houses up. If people would set up more free medical clinics, and people would go out and move for community control of police, so that they'll be assured that their son, their 17-year-old son, won't be killed by some racist cop or by some drunken cop when he goes out with his friends or something like that. When people start becoming involved in trying to gain control of the things that affect their lives in the community, if the pigs sit back and allow, which we doubt, they'll ever allow total community control of things that affected people's lives, because that would mean an end to capitalism. And we just don't see that as
Well,
As
the
possibility.
the system has enormous co-optive energy, and it, you can do a thing like take the Panther breakfast program in Chicago. It was embarrassing the city, and so Mayor Daley got up one morning and announced that the city was going to feed everybody. And it never did anything of the sort. But the impression was out there that Mayor Daley really is responsive, and it kind of taking the steam out of
Panther program.
out of people's demonstrations of what they can do for
Yeah,
themselves.
but that means that one of the jobs of the movement, or of people like us, and particularly people like you working with media, is
Right.
to expose that and to find a way of getting across to people exactly how it is that the system manages to do that. And sometimes what it means is, for instance, just taking over housing, while it's very important that people do it, is not going to really change the control of the money that's necessary to get whatever resources you need, whether you're going to fix up the house yourself with your own hands, or whether you're going to do it by hiring, say, a local contractor to do it so that local people have jobs, or however you're going to do it. The control of that resources is still somewhere else. And it seems to me that one of the really important things that is particularly a good way to use people who've been through the whole system and gotten all kinds of training, they should make use of that training as a way of serving the people instead of a way of serving the power structure. And that means either expose or